Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And it looks like it's going to be a pretty interesting week because, as you can see from the ticker, quite a bit of movement has been happening. And this of course will have something to do with the plex sales, Ascension, the crazy Rorcal mining that's been going on. And so let's head to the couch and let's dive right in. So here we go. Sitting down, grabbing the market, and we'll just go straight to plex. That will be at 40 seconds. Let's take a look at these. Oh, in the few minutes that it took me to prepare for EVE Talk, like 11 plex came in at $1,060,000. I think those will be picked up pretty quickly because you can see right underneath that $1,097,098. So we're closing in on 1.1 billion once again with plex. Not exactly something that I expected to happen, but let's grab some 6 months. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. You can see that we're bouncing back up just a little bit. We went back to almost 1.1 billion average. And here at the tail end though, we've got a bit more pressure. The bad news is that the 5-day moving average is still underneath the 20-day moving average. So we would need that to cross to see a second spike coming. But if you completely missed out on the previous sell opportunities above 1.2 and you can still make some profit at around 1.1, this is probably the right time to look into selling the plex that you want to turn into liquid ISK for some different reasons. So plex just bouncing back up a little bit. Bars are at $1,023,000, something like that. So bars above $1 billion, well above $1 billion. Is not bad if you managed, of course, to buy at around the bottom parts here, 850, 900 million, were possible last summer. So I still think that this will turn out to become the top. We can see some hesitation at the tail end. You can see the increased volumes here as well, which have probably correlated with the decrease in price. Why increased volumes on the seller's part? I would say a lot of people selling plex in order to get the ISK for their blueprints for everything engineering complex related. It's a lot of rig blueprints. You've got the right Taru and all the engineering complex blueprints as well, plus the service modules. It's a decent amount of ISK, and so I think that this is why this dropped here. The real question is going to be, what do you expect to happen after all of this has settled down? Maybe even after the sales for the upcoming holidays will be over. So let's say January, February, your expectations there could of course decide what you would want to do at this point. If you actually expect an increase in price for some reason in January, February, then you could still try to hold on to them. If, like me, you suspect that we will actually start to see the first signs of like decreased activity from the alpha clones, then I think it's and you're still looking to sell, I think this is going to be one of your last opportunities to sell at around 1.1 billion or better than that in the upcoming days. So yeah, if you're still looking to sell, I have less than half the plex I started with left, so I'm not looking to sell at the moment. But if you're looking to sell, I think that this is another opportunity for you to try and do so. Next up, we've got the multiple pallet trading certificate. Very interesting difference between this one and the plexus is that you can see at the tail end, we're actually closing in on the 20-day moving average. These are currently selling for $1,140,000,000. Bars are at $1,073,000,000. This is one of the indicators that at least in the short term, plex might go up a little bit more than they've been doing now. So if there's this close relation and if the trading certificates are right when it comes to demand for these types of services, this could stop plex from continuing their latest pull back here, and it could be a bit of pressure to actually go back up here. So it's interesting, although here at the very tail end we can also see that we are hesitating to really cross over the 20-day moving average above 1.12 billion as an average daily price. So it still remains a bit risky. It just means that at the moment there's definitely pretty good demand for plexus, that the price is at least hesitating, but could it go a little bit higher? I think unfortunately that holiday sales is going to put a stop on that. Next up, we've got the pilot body resculpts, also hesitating. Yeah, that's basically the pattern that we're seeing here. Big volume spike with the alpha clones coming in here, but after that things have settled down a little bit, and here at the tail end we're basically stuck at the 270 million range. 5-day moving average, 20-day moving average. Again, no sign that these are going to cross or that we're going to go up substantially all of a sudden, and more sales will only I think put more pressure on these prices. It's a very small market, you can see very little demand, very little supply. 275 million for the sellers at the moment. Skill extractors should, still not a year old, so let's go like that. Should show a very similar chart to Plex, and it does. You can see here a bounce back from 240 million up to 260, but we're back down to 250 with a little bit of momentum. Again, basically hesitation after the previous peak. You can see slightly higher volumes here as well on the decrease in price here. The real question is going to be, I think, for the skill extractors and skill injectors in the next few months, can volumes remain a little bit up from what we've seen, let's say, through the summer and in the fall? That would indicate strong alpha clone activity, and that these guys are looking for skill extractors, skill injectors mostly, of course, in order to get more skill points. And then as a response, the market should see a higher volume for skill extractors as well, because it should mean that it is profitable to turn those into skill injectors by people that have SP farms or are willing to dump some of their SP. But you can see the very strong correlation with Plex right here, with again a second pullback, a bit of hesitation basically around the 250 million price mark. 253 million for the sellers, 239 million for the buyers. It's pretty obvious that the sellers are mostly dictating the prices here, so decent demand at the moment. Next up, we've got the skill injectors. That is quite a different picture here. We actually have the 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average, increasing prices up to 620 million on average. Increased volumes, it's not very noticeable, but you can see, I would say at the tail end here, that the average are up from fall and summer. So let's take a look at the sellers here. 632 million, decent supply as well. Half a front page, 48.50, 68, that's a decent amount. And the buyers are at 600 million or 586 for the other ones. So 630 average price, putting us at around 620. Yeah, again, very strong demand because people are going straight to the sellers for the skill injectors. There's very little need to dump your injectors to the buyers here, and so people are basically forced to pay the price that the sellers dictate here. And interestingly enough, yeah, these are going up in price slowly. Definitely have a little bit of momentum behind them, because we just crossed the 20-day moving average on the upswing after a little bit of a dip when Plex were at a high point, actually at 570 million. So this would have been a decent investment, could have made you a little bit of money. At the moment, I think it's mostly going to be the alpha clones that are going to have a big influence on this. If they cannot maintain high activity, high interest in alpha clones, this could drop back substantially. If we continue to see higher volumes and high activity in the skill injectors market, it's a very good sign for a very active free-to-play player base. Could be a very strong indicator for the health of the game, maybe even stronger than Plex. Why would I say that? Let's get back to the 6-month chart, since we're gonna jump back to other stuff after this. Why would I say that skill injectors could become a stronger indicator of the general health and activity in the game? I would say because there are so many Plex already floating around in the game itself that it basically creates a bit of a cushion, a bit of a buffer between active changes and changes in activity in the game and an impact on the Plex market. Whereas skill injectors, they are newer. Of course, people do have stocks of them. They're easier to make, but they're also a lot easier to consume. They cost less, and as a result, I think that skill injectors could turn out to become a very valuable barometer for EVE Online activity in general. All right, let's move on to some minerals at 9:45. 45, let's write that down, and let's get started with the really bad news right here. you can see titanium is apparently starting to dive off a cliff. Average price from 6 to 5, and now here 4 on average today. Did we ever drop really below that? No, not yet, but it's not looking good. Sellers are coming in at 446, 5 ISK 46, sorry, 547, something like that. We still have almost a billion units coming in here, 1.5 billion units coming in at 549. So all of this below 550 does indicate a serious crash in the price. We used to be able to average 6. Anything above 6 was actually a pretty decent price for titanium, but it looks like, well, from reports on Reddit that I've seen, there's a huge amount of Rorcal mining happening at the moment in nullsec. There are losses as well, but it just cannot cope with the sheer volume of stuff that is being mined. And one of the things that I was a little bit afraid of, I didn't think it would happen, but seems to be happening. Titanium is historically a high-sec mineral, right? You get that from feldspar. It's very common in high-sec to mine feldspar. I didn't think that nullsec guys would start mining for this stuff as well and then bring it to Cheetah, which is something that must be happening for prices to dump like this. Another possibility is that they're basically now mining so much of the high-sec minerals as well in nullsec that they don't need to import as much anymore, and as a result we could see a crashing of the price. So we do have buyers coming in, but at 511, 1.2 billion units, 1.2 billion units here. Basically it gives a decently balanced picture in supply demand at a much lower price point, around 5.5. This is going to reduce your high-sec mining efficiency by quite a lot, where titanium is extremely common in your high-sec mining activities. So let's see if Pyrite is following suit. Unfortunately, Pyrite is following suit, and Pyrite was already at a very low point. So we're now averaging 7 ISK on the chart here. Median daily price so far 7.17 for the sellers, 688 for the buyers. And then the craziest thing is, look at these, a billion units here, 52 million units here, 100 million units here, all below 7.5 ISK, which is historically extremely low. Bars below 7 ISK, I don't think I've ever really seen that. And on top of that, there is less demand than supply, so prices are bound to go even lower. There is still pressure on the pyrite price. If this goes to 6 ISK, it's crazy. That's a titanium price. So look at the volumes here, really huge volumes as well. Probably indication of mostly sellers, just huge volumes of pyrite being brought to the market here. Pretty crazy stuff. Hopefully there is one more theory that could mean that buying or holding is still the right choice, would be that some really big groups, I know that the Imperium or the Goons are mining up a storm at the moment, and that they're actually doing this to basically crash the price intentionally so that they can take profit later on. The Goons are definitely known for market manipulation in certain aspects of the game, if they somehow have the means to basically control the supply of those in a sufficient manner. They did this with the ice interdiction, where they would probably be buying up stocks, maybe mining for their local ice, and then they would go on an interdiction campaign in high-sec for those same isotopes, and as a result they could make a huge amount of ISK from that. Could the same be happening in the mineral market? To be honest, it would be very hard to compete with high-sec, but if they can get the volumes going from nullsec, they could actually do it, and then all they would have to do is start another Hulkageddon campaign at the right time when they've stocked up on all of these cheap minerals that are coming in, and then increasing the price, starting to sell off their stocks in an efficient way. It is possible. So actually I would think that would be very, very cool, right? They have the means now with the Rorcals to mine up so much that they can actually compete with high-sec. And what is the thing that, let's say, Saudi Arabia often does with the oil prices if it becomes a problem. For instance, from new technology, from shale, well, they dump a lot of their stocks on the market, crashing their prices, forcing out the competition. People in HiSec, lower efficiency, they might not want to mine anymore, and at the right time they would then strike on the remaining ones with a Hulkigeddon campaign, and thus they would basically be able to corner this market. It's a possibility, although the difference between interdicting and trying to manipulate a single ice market compared to the entire mineral market is of course of a scale that would have never been seen. So if an operation like that is underway, it would be absolutely huge economically speaking. And logistically speaking, it would also be a pretty big risk. Next up, let's take a look at Mexalon. Let's see if HiSec minerals are indeed crashing, and these are definitely going down. 6-month low 59 ISK, below 60 for Mexalon is starting to be it's basically a bit below average. It's not hugely bad, but of course it probably will have some momentum behind it. Actually looks like it's okay. At 120 million, 40 million here, 115 million here. A full front page of new sell orders though. On the bars though, you can also see a full front page, including 137, 28, 37. So slight edge to the supply. You can see where the momentum is heading here. It's obviously down. We are at a 6-month low. It never crossed the 60 ISK page on average before, but that's happening at the moment. And it's still an okay price for Mexalon, but it's not great anymore, right? Anything between 60 and 70 is normal and okay. Everything above 70, like 74 throughout the summer, was actually a really good price for Mexalon, historically speaking. With the mining changes, of course, what has historically been true may no longer hold true, of course. Here is Isogen next, has, as you can see from the 1-year chart, been languishing pretty much for the entire 1 year, except here in June, May, something like that. No, probably around May we got a little bit of a bump, but since then it's just been going down and down, trying lower and lower price points, and it's still not done. Look at that here, 65 ISK on average at the tail end. 5-day moving average still below the 20-day moving average, and we still seem to have even more momentum on the downtrend. So sellers are at 65.85. We still see 74 million units coming in here, which is pretty crazy. Full front page of new sellers. So that would mean all of this is still in the last 24 hours up to here. So we still have 50 million here, 14 million here, 74 million units coming in here at 65.91. Buyers are at 64.37. You can see that margin closing. It's still oversupply that is driving the price down here, despite the historically extremely low prices. Next up, we've got Noxium. Actually holding on a little bit, but of course at 393 is below 400. That is still a very low price, and I would say if they're trying to do this manipulation, Noxium would probably not be on their target, because that's already in this extremely oversupplied situation from all sources. So if a single group in nullsec is trying to crash into individual markets for minerals, they would not do it in Noxium, because other nullsec groups are already and have for months and years been actively mining for Noxium as well. So they would have to compete with nullsec spaces, and those guys can actually ramp up their production to the same level. So I would say the theory here is that nullsec mining yields have gone up so much that they can actually compete with the higher numbers of HiSec miners at this point. Even a single group could do that, and that could be what's happening. Otherwise, it's just general markets where maybe less demand from nullsec or increased supplies from nullsec are crashing the prices as well. But it's not entirely a surprise that Noxium seems to be a bit immune to that, because Noxium has basically been in that situation since the ore changes, the rebalancing of minerals in ores, which was actually meant to promote nullsec mining as well. After that, we've got some nullsec ones. Here is Zydrine. This is very interesting. Actually going up a little bit, 935, 948 a week ago. Well, not a lot. Basically staying below 1000 ISK, but hesitating at this point to go even lower or to really break out. The interesting thing is sellers above 1000 ISK, 1029, 28.29 for the sellers. Buyers are at 9.55. And are they coming in? Yeah, almost a full front page. 2 million units being bought here does indicate slightly stronger demand. So hesitation in the sideround market, and Megasite, we can see that one jumped back up a little bit towards 1200 ISK. Yep, 1200 on average here a couple days ago. 1208, 1209 for the sellers, 11,150 for the buyers. And so strange thing is that my gamble or my theory that if you're buying Megasite in sideround, be careful, because those would be the ones crashing down most, as Rorcals would be mining like crazy for those, seems to have been wrong, because that one actually makes a little bit of money now. If you manage to buy Megasite for close to 1,000, you can try to sell it at 1,200 now. 20% profit, not all that bad. And it's the high-tech minerals that are suffering the most from the mining changes so far. The real question is, market fundamentals, or is there something else going on there? And let's not forget Morphite this week. I've actually forgot to grab this one last week. I was a little bit too focused on the stuff that I can mine myself very easily and I'm used to. A bit of a jump up here to almost 10,000 ISK, but some hesitation at tail end as well. Sellers are still coming in at 9,000. Is it substantial? 9,200, 9,100. It's still more than 1 million units coming in here. Yeah, supply is still, look at that, still 89 days, less than 24 hours old, almost 2 pages. Buyers are at 8,700, so I'm seeing slight hesitation as well, but you can still pick up more fight for less than 9,000 ISK on the buyer side of things, which historically is very cheap. Of course, more fight also coming from nullsec, so it could still be under pressure as well. The one thing is that all of this could completely change on the upside substantially if we actually have a major war. So from that perspective, I'm definitely going to hold on to my minerals. I'm not going to panic sell at this point. But the two things that are a little bit surprising to me is that the nullsec minerals seem to be hesitating and recovering. These are not being dumped even more by the higher yields. Instead, it's the high-sec minerals that are being punished, that are suffering from these mining changes. Very interesting situation, and definitely not what I expected. The EVE Online sandbox never ceases to amaze me. Next up, let's touch on the PI stuff, which is at 2210. Okay. Let's take a look at this. Here are consumer electronics. These were crashing down substantially to almost below average prices, as you can see right here. So 10,400 ISK. That was a little bit too much, a little bit too fast. So we bumped back up to 12.5. But now you can see that there is some momentum down as well for the construction blocks supply. Full front page of new ones coming in. So we went down a little bit too fast to well below average prices. Volumes increased a little bit in a couple of days, and so we went back up. But the pressure is still on apparently for PI materials, at least for construction blocks. Let's see if it turns out that way in consumer electronics as well. So consumer electronics actually dove down a little bit earlier, September, October. We went back to average prices, and here at the tail end you can see the formation of even lower prices, probably a little bit below or just on the averages, and under pressure, higher volumes as well. Let's take a look at supply here. That's actually quite timid, 12,160, and in the last 24 hours, not that much. And my mouse is actually hanging a little bit. Let's see if I can clear this out. That feels a little bit better. Next up, coolants. Let's see what that one is doing. Here on the charts, you can obviously see the pressure building up. I would say that right now we are touching average prices at 10,500 ISK, something like that. But you can see at the tail end here that we are definitely under pressure, going down in prices. So buyers are drying up, sellers, all of this in the last 24 hours. Yeah, still in the last 24 hours, more than a full front page coming in at 11,000 ISK. I think that returning veteran players that have large PI setups have come back to the game with Ascension and are now trying to make some money off of that, and this is causing an increased supply, which is much more than the market can handle. which is unfortunate after a very strong summer for PI that I basically completely missed. Enriched uranium, also, well, still a little bit above average, you can see that here, but again, 5-day moving average well below 20-day moving average, and the pressure on these PI materials is obvious, and this is going to be from supply. Let's take a look at that. Half a front page, 34,000 here, 15, 18,000. People are definitely bringing in the volumes, whereas buyers are hesitating. They're staying away as they see prices going down. Some people become impatient. They sell it straight to the sellers, to the buyers. And buyers, they know that basically they can still pick it up pretty cheaply as well. And as a result here, we are going down. Interesting. Mechanical parts next was having a very strong end of summer actually. So here in the summer, nothing too special, pretty much average prices. It's actually on September, October where we end up. But here at the tail end, again, 5-day moving average diving down well below the 20-day moving average. And the pressure, although not that visible on the full chart just yet, you can see that there is some serious hesitation in the mechanical parts market. Fresh supply, not that much, but the numbers, 27,000, 26,000, 15,000 in the last 24 hours, seems to be decently substantial. I think this could continue to be under pressure as well. Oxygen next, let's see what that one is doing. A simple processed material. Okay, trying to hold on. Maybe here the dive down from 535 to 384 was a bit too steep, a bit too quickly as well. The one thing to note is that the 5-day moving average did manage to cross the 20-day moving average, but the question is going to be fresh supply at this point, I guess. And that's still looking okay, actually. There is fresh supply coming in, but not by all that much. Still, I think if more supply comes in by next week, we'll be on the downtrend again. Next up, we got robotics. That combines a lot of the previous materials. Oh, doing okay. Down a little bit from a very strong summer again, as you can see here, with highs of 110,000 ISK. Here another high at that point as well, but now averaging 93,000, 95,000. So a little bit of pressure. It's just not as pronounced in robotics just yet. Fresh supply, also nothing all too crazy. So robotics still doing strong, which is quite nice, because that means I think robotics is made by like 4 of these previous types of materials, refined materials. If those go down in price and robotics manage to stay this strong at the moment, that means you're actually making more money from your robotics productions. Next up, we've got rocket fuel. Still holding strong as well here, pretty stable one at 12,000 ISK, bit above average if you look at the entire 1-year chart. So one of the exceptions here, rocket fuel, very stable and in a pretty good position. Self-harmonizing power cores next. You can see that those are starting to be under pressure as well. I would say that advanced PI materials, it's another step up. So it requires a lot more. If there is a general bit of a downtrend, then I think that we are starting to go down as well. Maybe some of the speculators on increased prices from the engineering complex are starting to dump some of their stocks as well. And we can clearly see on the median daily prices that they're going down from 2.67 million to 2.35 million in a matter of a few days. I would say there is some visible pressure here as well. Superconductors next, still holding strong. Okay, there was a bit of hesitation here. A dive from 16,000 to 14,000 is quite substantial in around a week. So we recovered a little bit. Again, the interesting part is going to be after this. Are we going to go back down or can we manage to go back up? My expectation is that we are going to go back down after this. Fresh supply here. Half a front page, but 152,000 units of superconductors is quite a lot to get rid of at less than 16,000 ISK. It's obviously going to decrease the chances that will go back up in price at this point. So superconductors, bit of hesitation again, but from 16 to 14k in like a week or a bit more than that is quite fast. So this bump here is basically normal market reaction. You can also see the higher volumes here means that people did start to invest in superconductors at 14k. Turns out they were right. You can sell for a better price right now. Text sculptures next. Text sculptures were a little bit strange. I think. Yeah, because throughout August, September, we actually were recovering from a higher price at around the Citadel expansion, and now here, basically after a double dip, we're slowly recovering towards 11,000 ISK, which is a bit above average if you look at the entire 1 year chart. But it's not a crazy price either. So test cultures have basically been impacted a little bit crazily, I think, from the structures. Maybe they were needed the most in the structure components. I'm not entirely sure on that. But as a result, we had a very bad summer for this one, and we're only now recovering from that. So I would say if you're making test cultures, it's the right time to try to sell those, because the other ones, the other PI materials, do seem to be under pressure. And just like we've seen with minerals, it was very delayed with a strong Mexalon summer, but a very weak summer for all the other high-sec minerals. Eventually, some people are going to move their production, are going to emphasize test cultures for their production because of the better prices. And eventually, this will come under pressure as well if the pressure on the other on the other PI materials manages to maintain as well. Wait to our mainframes finally, holding on okay at around 2.7 million, but you can see that the daily average prices are starting to be a little bit below the rest of the chart, meaning that there is probably a little bit of pressure on this market as well. So that's it for PI. I'm definitely reading this as returning players, increasing supply and having their impact on the prices after a very strong summer for PI. Next up, Tech One chips. That's going to be 31 minutes. Okay, still choosing the same one. I think that is actually a decent mix with Caracal, Tristan, and I'm basically looking for that pattern where the increased prices, increased volumes are starting to show up in other ships than just in the frigate. So here's the Caracal. Increased volumes are pretty obvious, but it looks like the prices are not following suit. These are still remaining at around at less than 11 million. Sellers are at 10.65 million for one. So let's say 10.9 million almost for the sellers, and less than 10 million just underneath that for the buyers. The way I'm seeing this is that basically in the Tech One market there is increased demand. People do want to have Caracals ready for their alpha clones in nullsec. People fly Caracals as alpha clones. It's not a bad ship at all, but the industrialists were ready for that, and they have stocks, they are producing these Caracals, and as a result the prices are not going up all too substantially. Next up here we get the Corsair Amar Cruiser. Again, volumes, you can see that there is higher volumes, but you can also see that the prices are basically staying quite average here. Not much to say about this, except yeah, apparently the producers were ready for this as well. The Dominic's next. It's a battleship, so this should not be influenced by alpha free-to-play characters. Slightly higher volumes here at the tail end. That's quite interesting. Price, let's see if I can scale this a little bit. Price does seem to be going up just a little bit as well. 5-day moving average finally crossing 20-day on the upside, heading towards, let's see what that is, sellers. Yeah, trying to head towards 190 million, up a little bit in price. This could be an indication of increased activity in general, which, if the PI market is any indication, should be the case. So interesting to see the Dominics after a low point of like 170 million, so between 170 and 180 on average, is trying to come back a little bit on higher volumes. Very interesting, because of course battleships are a bit bigger to produce, takes more effort, but your potential profits can be bigger as well, I think. Next up here we get the Merlin, popular Caldari frigates. Here we do see the alpha clone impact, increased volumes, probably 2 to 3 times the average volumes. Increased prices, yeah, definitely went up from, even if we take an average here of 300,000 ISK, around 400,000 ISK. Sellers are at, let's take a look at that, 390,000 ISK. Fresh supply, well, 372 is quite a lot, but they're not going completely crazy. So I think that basically the increased volumes and the alpha characters are adding a premium 20-25% to the Merlin, which is good news for frigate production. I think you're making a bit more money on those. The Oracle next, let's take a look at that. Not much to say, pretty flat chart, volumes pretty flat as well. It is of course a battle cruiser, quite a specialized battle cruiser as well, because it is tier 3, so it uses oversized guns, and this is actually remaining decently stable. Next up we've got the Raven, another battleship. Maybe we should try to scale this chart a little bit. The exact opposite from the Dominic's, actually under pressure and at a 6-month low point of 170 million, so there should be a bit too much supply. Yeah, half a front page, they're still coming in. Where is the demand? It's just non-existent for the Raven battleships. I guess that people are preferring their Dominic's for PvE to the Ravens at the moment, and as a result, yeah, 6-month low prices, probably also 1-year low prices, extremely cheap Ravens at the moment, but they're just not being flown in PvP at the moment, and as a result, well, this is what you're getting, right? Even on the low supplies, because this is not huge availability, most are bringing just 1 or 2 Ravens here and there. We have these very low prices, which is a pretty crazy situation. Next up we've got the Thrasher. Here we go. Yeah, that is very interesting, something that I was actually hoping for. So it takes a little bit of time for people to skill up to a higher level, a higher tier of ship, so from frigate to destroyer. And here we see this wave rippling through the first destroyer. Here is the Thrasher, up in volume substantially, nice little jump in price. The question is it going to be sustainable and substantial? So 1.16 million on average. Sellers are now at, drum roll, yeah, 1.3 million for the Thrasher. Buyers 1.2 million as well, up in price. So here it is. I think that basically Minotaur Alpha characters have been scaling up to the destroyer class ships, and as a result you get these increased volumes and the increased prices in these as well. If you can make Thrashers at the moment, you're probably getting a nice little premium for building those compared to your mineral prices, which just keep dropping. So there you go. It's very good to see that this is actually happening. This is also an indication that people are sticking to it. Another possibility, of course, a Thrasher doctrine in nullsec for their alpha clones, and that a huge alliance or a big alliance decide to buy up a lot of them. But the fact that the buyer price has gone up like this as well, I think is an indication that it's more of a general trend where people are graduating to destroyers as alpha clones, and that the Thrasher amongst the Minotaur characters is very popular. Next up we've got Tornado then, tier 3 battlecruiser, much less dramatic chart. You can see a bit higher volume here, maybe for some suicide ganking, but overall the price is definitely pretty stable. Tristan could be interesting next. Let's take a look at that. The increased volume so far, it's a bit more of an on-off story here, so you do get higher peaks, but you also go back to the, well, actually here, even this lower peak at 370 is quite a bit higher than the other lower peak. So yeah, increased volumes have been able to be maintained for a bit under 2 weeks now. Higher prices, what is this here? Average price is 530,000. Sellers are at 540,000, that's just one here, 590,000. Yeah, definitely a bit of a premium, an alpha character premium because of higher usage. The Venture, of course, is also, yeah, look at, oh my god, look at a huge increases in volumes. The interesting bit is that the price is dropping down towards 320,000. ISK sellers are at 328. So for the Venture, because it is such a unique frigate and the best mining ship that an alpha character can fly, we do see these increased volumes. This I think will be maintained, but I would say that enough producers are ready for this, and as a result the price is already going to crash, crashing back down, and will reach the previous average of 250 to 70,000 ISK. I think we will recover from this, because the Venture is unique, and it's also the final stop for the alpha characters that want to mine. They can't go into a mining barge or something like that without going Omega, and as a result I think that this market will find its balance very quickly, even with these huge increased volumes, because basically producers are ready to jump on this opportunity. It's a complete no-brainer. if alpha characters will mine, they will mine in the venture. If alpha characters will PvP, you don't know. Is it going to be mostly in frigates? Which race it is going to be? Are they going to graduate up to cruisers and stick with it? Are they going to go for destroyers? That's all up in the air. And as a result here, you do have this big spike in volumes. You do have a bit of a price spike, but you have a recovery as well, which I think is going to bring it back into maybe 300,000 ISK, something like that. A little bit of a premium should be expected because of the higher volumes, but it's not going to be as interesting, I think, as the PvP ships. And finally, we've got the Vexor flat as a lake on a completely windless day here, especially at the tail end. Increased volumes a little bit, but still nothing all that visible. I think that this is an indication that people are not scaling up to cruisers just yet. The Thrasher indicates that they're probably getting into the destroyer range at the moment for alpha characters. That started around Ascension. Thrasher would also be a go-to if you want to try to suicide gank on some alpha accounts as well, which could be why this is all of a sudden so interesting. Basically, they're getting there, and now people are getting ready to do a bit more suicide ganking, which is up substantially already in Isaac at the moment. So there you go, Tech 1 ship market, interesting. I'm starting to see the wave of alpha characters roll through there. Next up, Tech 2, 40, all right. 40. Let's go over these. Unfortunately, I expect still a very uneventful Tech 2 market, basically until a war drops or a CCP announcement drops. I think that this is basically not going to be a lot. So here is the broadsword 6-month chart. You can see it's basically extremely flat. Volumes are quite low as well. There's not much to say. The basilisk here again, very flat charts. One volume spike that did not have any impact on the prices here, and so on average 40 basilisks. It's just very tricky to make any real money on this trading. Here's the Cerberus. We did have one price spike here in the summer. I think that was due to or no, before the summer, that was due to a specific PvE event where the Cerberus was king. Basically, this was the Johnny Pew effect. He showed how the Cerberus was super effective in the Shadow of the Serpent event, I think it was. And as a result, a lot of people jumped on the ship here. But since then, we basically recovered. Maybe this little bump here and here on the 1-year chart can be chalked up to another PvE event. But other than that, basically very, very flat. Ever lowering volumes as well. Now we're heading for less than 100. Yeah, less than 100 on average a day. That's definitely not something that traders want to see. If you do still want to gamble on Tech 2 ships, I would say go for the smallest ones, because those should have the highest volumes and have the best chance of actually showing some volatility. The Damnation is the one exception. Of course, the reason we all know this is the booster changes. We can see that these are going back down in prices. Crossing of the 20-day moving average here definitely happened, but the increased volumes makes it very interesting. I think the way it works is that if you want the best armor boost, you want something like a Damnation on the field, but if you feel the Damnation, you have to be on grid, and those tend to be primary targets quite often. And so this puts the Damnation in a completely different place than before the Ascension expansion, and as a result we do have volatility here. But as I've said, this is due to a CCP intervention. So in case of a war and you actually find yourself in a position where you could buy a few cheap Damnations, that could be really big, but again, I think you will stay dependent on a war actually happening. Here is the Hound next. Here, okay, very interesting. Did go up to 24 million. We're back down to 21 million. Sellers are already down to 21. Yeah, 21.5. Buyers are still below 20 million. I would personally stick to frigates if I'm looking for opportunities. So here we had buy opportunities at like 18 million, 18.5 million. You could jump on that, anything below 19 million on the buyer side of things, to try and stock up on something. From time to time, bombers are considered cheap enough to still fly out and basically lose, right, for some whelp fleets. It happens from time to time, and that could still create slight opportunities now and then when there's not a war happening. And in case of a big war, you will see huge bomber fleets that will get lost as well, and then your investment could actually turn out to be quite fruitful. So if I were looking for any place to park my ISK Intake 2 ships, it would be in the smaller craft. Here's the Kronos next, jumped up a little bit on higher volumes as well. Yeah, 20 Kronoses in a day here, quite interesting. High of 1.3 billion, quite expensive, going back down to 1.2 billion. Average is 1.15, something like that. So a bit of a jump up in the Kronos, but again, because of the hugely low volumes, does make a lot of sense because of the extremely low volumes in these Marauders and the price of $1 billion. This is a huge gamble that I would personally never take for investing. Here's the Raptor next. This is coming from a pretty interesting place, right? 23 million at a low point here on the daily averages, now working its way back up. So you could have probably bought Raptors close to 20 million. They're now selling for almost 25 million. Slight opportunity again, but I think that you have a slight chance because average volumes here probably around 100 ships, 150, 160. So sometimes here you do still have enough inventory that gets moved so that there is a slight opportunity, but in general it is still much less volatile than it used to be before the tax changes. The Sabre would also be within consideration, especially since the jump up did just happen here from, let's see here, 47.6 million to 57.6 million, so 10 million increase, which would be 20%. Definitely not bad. We're on our way back down after that, 53 million. Sellers are now at, let's take a look at this, 47 was the lower average. 55 million, 50 million for the buyers. You can see that we'll go back towards 47 pretty quickly on this one. But interdictors, of course, are the riskier parts of flying in a Gnostic battle. And so as a result, these destroyers, so these advanced destroyers, interdictors here, would still be interesting if you can buy at one of these low points as well. The volumes on this you can also see are quite more substantial, 114, 120 maybe on average a day. You can do something within a market like that. Unfortunately, for something like the Basilisk with volumes of less than 40 a day, it's just a bit too risky in my opinion, unless a war happens. That's still the one caveat. Next up here we've got the Stork. Hasn't existed for more than a year, so we need to take a different look at the chart here. Yeah, it's flattening out, I would say. You can see that the peaks are lowering, and here we're basically stabilizing at 62 million. It is a newer Tech 2 ship, so fewer people actually are producing these. It is pretty useful. Command destroyers are pretty useful. So again, I'm saying in the Tech 2 market, if you want to invest in this, I would go for the smallest ship first. Stealth bombers, I think, would be my number one market to take a look at. Next up, we've got interceptors. Interceptor fleets do exist, except that they're mostly used in actual bigger fleet battles and are rarely lost because of their nature. After that, you could move up to destroyers. I would say interdictors first, because those can be lost. And then if you're still looking for a place to invest, then the new command destroyers could be interesting as well, because they are new, not because they're being flown a lot. Or that much more than any other ship, or because they're being lost a lot, because you have to risk them specifically or anything like that. But just because they're newer, it's gonna be, I think, trickier to get those production lines up and running, which some people have the production lines set up for stealth bombers, interceptor much more than for the Stork. I think people will have huge amounts of blueprint copies, for instance, ready for all of these older Tech 2 ships compared to these newer command destroyers. So that could be a final reason to still consider the command destroyers as something to look at in the Tech 2 market. But unfortunately, cruisers, logistics cruisers and all of that stuff just seem to be too low in volumes, too stable in price, that unless you're willing to make a huge gamble on a war happening, I would not make a move on those at all. And here we get the Widow together with the Kronos also going back up in price to above $1 billion. So we basically had a little bit of a dip to a low 900 million ISK. Volumes are back basically a little bit, but volumes being back for the Widow means like 15 ships sold a day. So again, very tricky to make any money on this at the moment. Next up, the Tech 3 markets. 49.25. Let's go. Let's take a look at that. Last week, I think we were being swamped with oversupply, and of course, a big part of that was because some tactical destroyers got nerfed quite badly. Here is the Confessor still going down 34.3 million on average as price, 34.9 million for the sellers, 31.5 for the buyers, and yeah, basically definitely 1 year low point at the moment. So Confessor hit pretty hard by nerfs. Supply is bound to be pretty big. Yeah, 45, 19, 41 here. It's slowing down, so we're finding a new bottom, which I think could be interesting to take a bit of a gamble on. Again, don't go overboard, don't put all your ISK in that. But I think it could be interesting to gamble a little bit on the bottom for Confessors, which I think is going to start to come close, because we're no longer seeing 2 pages of new Confessors coming in the last 24 hours. So you could, I think, try to gamble this one. Next up, we've got the Hecate here. You can see that here the descent has stalled. 41.6 million is where this one is at, and 42 million for the sellers, 38 for the buyers. Supply still means I got an hour left, so that should be okay. Almost a full front page. 145 here is going to at least keep the prices stable, if not lower them a little bit. But has the Confessor been nerfed so badly that it's that much worse than the Hecate? I'm not entirely convinced by that, so this could be a bit of a market overreaction, which would be one indication that this is actually okay to take a gamble on. Next up here we've got Jackdaw, also going down in price towards 36 million. New supply is going to be interesting here, I think. New supply, yeah, still full front page of these, so this is still a few hundreds Jackdaws coming in here. That is still a bit of a problem, going to continue to put some pressure on this one. No sign of a bottom here just yet. And then finally we've got the Zwepel, which has also probably hit pretty badly by the nerf bat. Less than 35 million. Again, the fresh supply is where it's going to be interesting. And oof, that's still almost 1.5 front pages, 136, 120. So the Zwepel is still in a pretty bad place. I think that the Confessor might be bottoming out at this point. And for the Hecate, once these guys go low enough in price, the other ones, this should put a damper on Hecates as well, because they will start to move their production towards this one destroyer that still makes them 40, 45, 42 million on average on a good day. So I think that as a result of that, you could see a bit of a recovery in the right ships. Unfortunately, Jackdaw and Zwepel are still well oversupplied, so these guys will still continue to be under pressure a little bit, I think. Confessor, you might want to take one look at that. I'm not saying you should definitely buy, but there could be some money to be made there, in my opinion. Next up, we've got the Legion, one of the cruisers, slightly under pressure, but it's not all that bad. 143 million. Unfortunately, fresh supply is still almost a full front page and a low demand. This is becoming a low point where, in case of a war, you're making a pretty good deal on trying to pick some up here for like less than 140 million. It's definitely not a bad price for Tech 3 hulls. Next up here, we've got the Loki. Still under pressure. Look at that, definitely going down. Ooh, that's very low. That's crazy low. 110 million for the buyers, 117 million for the sellers, and new supply almost half a front page. It's definitely petering out. This should be a bottom, but I'm seeing this as a buy opportunity if you get the ISK to park in some Lokis at some point. I think those can become very powerful webbing ships, and they are part of some doctrines. Again, in case of a war, this could be a great opportunity because this is well below what we should expect. Next up here, we've got the Proteus holding on quite decently, bit of a tapering off at the tail end. 150 million because of very low demand, so 145 million for the buyers, 154 for the sellers. Under pressure from supply, yeah, full front page of new Protei 2225 here. It's much more than the market can handle. So again, this could go lower and we could see a buy opportunity form, which I think for the Loki is here. And next up, finally, we've got the Tengu, which is going slightly down in price as well, averaging 150. The sellers are at 150 million. Fresh supply, not all that much, too much. Half a front page, 143 for the buyers. It's of course a very strong PvE ship, which means that it can usually dictate a bit of a margin on some of the other Tech 3 cruisers. But the Loki, this is pretty crazy. I mean, I don't think that we've ever really been able to pick up Lokis at 110 million, or straight from the sellers at 117 is already a pretty damn good deal, historically speaking. So this is quite crazy. And then we have the Confessor, which is also at a really low point, 32 million. You can probably pick up Confessors at that price. It did get nerfed, but I'm also seeing the supply, the oversupply situation slowing down a little bit. 45, 41 is still a lot, but we don't have a full front page or more than that like in the Zweepel and the Jackdaw. And so I think that the Confessor might be bottoming out at this point and could also be a buy opportunity. They're definitely well below the other destroyers and cruisers, those two, and it still costs as much to produce them. So overall, I think that these are two Tech 3 buy opportunities. Very interesting. And finally, for the extra product today, we are at 56 minutes. Yes. Someone requested fuels, so I think that the fuel market is becoming less and less interesting, but I'm always willing to take a bit of a request. So let's maybe start with why I think that the fuel market is going to be less and less interesting as time goes on, because it doesn't matter which fuel block you use in a structure. People will always take the cheapest one, and this should basically bring all of the prices together in the same pot. Of course, ice products, some problem in the supply of a certain ice type could have a bit of an impact on one fuel block, but in general, for the fuel blocks themselves, I think that all of this is going to come together into a single unified price basically, and the variations should become less and less as time goes on and people move away from bosses which require specific fuel blocks to the new structures which basically can use any of the fuel blocks. So helium fuel blocks, sellers are at 20,000 ISK, buyers are at 18,500 ISK, and you can see at the tail end here that we are basically under pressure a little bit. So we do come off a pretty strong summer, but here we're definitely jumping down in price quite substantially. Higher volumes, maybe slightly, nothing all too dramatic. Next up, hydrogen fuel blocks, managing to hold on to its current price range, 21,000 ISK, 19,000 for the seller, so 1,000 ISK difference, which I think, let's see if it's oversupplied actually. Full front page, so people are bringing a lot of these in. Are we seeing any signs at the tail end here that we're going down? Maybe a slight sign here, median daily prices going down. So I would actually suspect hydrogen fuel blocks could go a bit lower as well. Nitrogen fuel blocks next here, under pressure, that's pretty obvious. What is the average price here? 20,200 ISK, 20.5 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. So here basically the buyers still need to be bought out a little bit to bring the price in line with helium fuel blocks, but it is the second one that is obviously under pressure. And then finally we've got oxygen fuel blocks, which is also under pressure. If you look at the median daily prices, 5-day moving average is crossing 20-day on the downtrend. Latest 21,000 ISK for the sellers, 20,600 for the buyers, but you can see that buyers are hesitating, which will help precipitate, I think, the oxygen fuel block downtrend. And this is one expectation that I do share with the market at the moment. So not only will these prices come together and be unified, because it doesn't matter which one you buy anymore, and most people will just jump to the cheapest fuel block as a default. I think that the engineering complexes allowing for public access and being decently cheap, like maybe $1 billion at the higher prices. On speculation, these will probably go down to like 750 million for a Raitaru engineering complex on average. Once everything settles down a little bit, they will become so common throughout New Eden that even the public ones will set ridiculously low tax prices, which will mean that most groups and most individuals, most small groups and most individuals will no longer need a boss in order to get the cheaper or better possibilities of production. They'll just move to public engineering complexes and do their stuff from there, which means that only one person, the owner, will have to use the fuel blocks. In general, I think that this will drop demand for fuel blocks as more engineering complexes will replace bosses for research and industry from individuals. And I actually think that we're looking at lower fuel prices in general. I said in my Raitaru video that it costs around 144 million a week to fuel all of my services, all of my structures, but that was at an average price of 22,000 ISK, and I think that we'll actually see this price go lower. That's already 10% less, which means only 130 million at the moment. At around 20,000 average buying price, which is going to be possible. And I actually think that we could go substantially lower, because this could mean substantially lower demand and usage of fuel in general in New Eden. That's my reading of the fuel block market. I could be wrong. I don't check this every day, because in general I think it's going to become less and less interesting. As I've said, the variety between fuel blocks should be almost negated by the market once the structures take over almost every job from bosses, which we're pretty close to that point anyways. And so as a result, it's just the general trend. Are we using more fuel or are we using less fuel? And the transition to the new structures which can provide public services should mean lower fuel costs because of lower fuel demand in general. So basically checking this maybe once a month or something like that is going to be is going to be enough to know what's happening with the fuel market. Once everything has settled down, of course, the fuel market can actually become a very good indication of activity inside the game, although just a few dedicated people can basically provide the services as well, and their drop in customers should not really have that much of an impact on usage anymore as well. It should basically become a very unified and very stable market, in my personal opinion. And that's going to be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.